Hey guys, tonight we're heading somewhere a little strange, somewhere between history and half sleep, where old stones remember things better than people do. You're not walking through a museum exactly, no velvet ropes or squeaky tour guides, just the soft creak of your steps and the faint whisper of bricks that have waited decades for someone to listen. You're in a town that doesn't show up on maps. It isn't big, just a few crooked alleys and some sagging lampposts, but the moment you step in, you can feel something, like the buildings are breathing, like the shadows aren't entirely still. And at night, when the wind slows down, the walls start talking, not with voices exactly, but with murmurs, fragments, stories. One of them just told you that the great library of Alexandria was burned down not once, but possibly 3 separate times. Yeah, good luck sleeping on that. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know where you're listening from and what time it is, because let's be real, nothing brings us together quite like insomnia and curiosity. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You run your hand along the uneven stone wall, feeling something almost like warmth under the mossy surface. The town is silent, no cars, no music, not even bugs, just the gentle buzz of a forgotten world, slowly remembering itself. The whisper tonight is coming from a wall near the corner bakery, though calling it a bakery is generous. The sign's long gone, but the scent of flour still lingers, mixed with time and damp. The voice in the wall cracks like old parchment. It began with fire, but not the kind you're thinking of. And just like that, you're standing in Alexandria. The city glows like polished bronze, sunlight dancing, off-marble columns and ships bobbing in the harbor. You're not dreaming, you're remembering something you've never known. You walk through the colonnade toward the famous library. No guards, no ropes. Just knowledge. And oh, there's a lot of it. Scrolls are piled in every corner, busts of philosophers frowning under layers of dust. You pass a room where scholars argue over whether the moon has weight. Someone's translating Sanskrit next to a man snoring into a stack of papyrus. But here's the twist. This isn't the day it burns. Not yet. This is the day it was almost saved. The wall tells you about a librarian named Callimachus, not the poet, not really. This Callimachus was a girl pretending to be her uncle. She'd snuck in under a false name to preserve something, an obscure manuscript about arithmetic and bees. Why bees? No one ever asks, but she swore they were the key to something. That day, a soldier stumbled in, torch in hand. A riot had broken out over tax records. Can you believe that? Tax records. And he was told to secure the place. But instead, he paused at the sight of her. She didn't plead, didn't run. She just handed him a scroll and said, "Read this first." And the fire didn't start that night. Historians still argue whether Caesar's troops, the Christians or the Muslims, were to blame. Some say it was all of them over centuries. But maybe the truth is murkier. Maybe it was delayed again and again by people like her. People who didn't beg for preservation, but tricked time itself into waiting just a little longer. Of course, it eventually burned, probably more than once, but not that day. And maybe not even for the reasons we think. A gust of wind pulls you back to the alley. The wall creaks like it's stretching after a long nap. You blink, and the bakery's gone. No flour, no moss. Just empty bricks and the faintest smell of honey. You step away, and the wall gives you one last whisper. Some stories survive because they're written down. Others survive because someone remembers to listen. There's a rusted sign nearby. You wipe it clean with your sleeve. Underneath the grime, etched in fading letters, "Curiosity fed here." You smile, not because it makes sense, but because it almost does. And then, just faintly, the next wall begins to hum. The sound isn't quite music. It's more like static and memory, filtered through old brick and flaking paint. You follow it down a cobblestone lane that curves like it's trying to avoid something. That's when the smell hits you. Strong coffee, dust, and the faint citrus of dried lemon peel. You duck under a hanging vine and find yourself in front of a forgotten cafe. Its name has long since peeled off the awning, but the iron table outside still holds a cup. No steam, no lipstick stain. Just a cup that's been waiting. The wall. Here talks faster, eager, like it's been holding its breath since 1933. You want a real story? It says. Let's talk about the day Albert Einstein forgot his own theory. That gets your attention. You step inside the cafe, not literally, it's half crumbled, but in your mind, the doorway opens. You pass through into a golden haze of clinking spoons and low murmurs. The booths are filled with people who all seem slightly too brilliant to be this sleepy. A woman draws equations on a napkin. A man in suspenders debates the nature of time with the sugar dispenser. And then there's Einstein. He's not giving a lecture or composing some legendary paper. No, he's slumped in a booth with Charlie Chaplin, eating a slice of apple pie and squinting at a crossword. Chaplin chuckles. "I'm telling you, Al, the answer is entropy." Einstein shakes his head. No, that's too obvious. And anyway, it doesn't feel right." You lean closer. The wall's whisper slips into your ear. "They were here often. Every Thursday, one part genius, one part comedy, and somewhere between the two, an idea got lost. See, this was the cafe where Einstein almost published a theory about collective dreaming. It was rough, scribbled in the margins of a newspaper, but it connected memory, gravity, and shared unconsciousness. The waitress once spilled tea on the page. Chaplin wiped it off, accidentally smearing ink across a crucial formula. Einstein laughed and said, "Well, now we'll never solve it." And they never did. Some historians doubt the story entirely. They say there's no record of a Dreamtime manuscript. Others say the theory reappeared decades later, misattributed, hidden in a Russian archive, scribbled in a child's notebook in Rio. But this wall swears it was real. It even remembers part of the formula. Not enough to solve it, but enough to haunt you, just a little. You glance at the dusty counter. A napkin flutters in the breeze, even though the windows are shut. You pick it up. No equations. Just one word. Remember. Of course, it's possible this whole memory is just stitched together from rumors and caffeine. The kind of thing that only shows up in places that are more dream than map. But there's something oddly comforting about it. Like knowing two of the most brilliant minds in history used to waste entire afternoons arguing over desserts and definitions. You step back outside. The air's cooler now, crisper. The cup on the table is gone. In its place, a coffee ring on the marble, shaped exactly like a question mark. The wall gives you a parting thought. Even the smartest minds forget things. It's the forgetting that makes the remembering interesting. You smirk. Yeah, that checks out. A breeze rustles through the alley, carrying with it the scent of cinnamon and old books. You turn your head and notice a staircase you could have sworn wasn't there before. It twists upward into shadows and ivy, and just faintly, from somewhere above, a new whisper begins. The staircase is narrow, carved from stone so worn it feels more like memory than architecture. You run your fingers along the railing, cold metal that hums ever so slightly, like it's remembering too. Each step creaks like it's whispering someone else's name. Halfway up, a flicker of movement catches your eye. A leaf flutters past you, except it isn't a leaf. It's a torn scrap of paper, yellowed and smudged, with a doodle of a very angry tree and a name. Napoleon. At the top of the stairs, you find a small rooftop garden, overgrown, forgotten, pots tipped sideways, vines curling around rusted chairs, and right in the center stands a tree, short, defiant, with bark as dark as old ink, and leaves that shimmer like bronze in the moonlight. It speaks. Not in words exactly, but in dry, rustling whispers that settle behind your ears, the kind of voice that waits until you're alone to tell you something strange. This tree, it says, grew from the pocket of Napoleon Bonaparte. You blink. Apparently during one of his less glamorous campaigns, mud, fleas, questionable wine, Napoleon's coat tore at the seam. He stuffed a handful of rations, maps, and some wild seeds into the lining. One night, exhausted and soaked from a storm, he took off the coat and hung it near a fire. The fire didn't catch, but the coat changed. It dried with a strange stiffness, and a week later, when he reached the next village, one of his soldiers found a sprout growing out of the coat pocket. They named it l'arbre de l'insolence, the tree of defiance. It was small, ridiculous looking, and utterly unkillable. Napoleon reportedly carried it for a week in his saddlebag before gifting it to a gardener in some remote town he never visited again. And here it is, allegedly, whispering into your ears like an old general with a grudge and nothing left to lose. You ask silently because you're not totally sure how tree etiquette works, how it ended up on this rooftop. The tree rustles. Some say it grows where pride has been forgotten, it says. Others say it follows the lost pieces of great men. And then it adds, almost smugly, or maybe I just walked. The wind picks up and the tree leans slightly, casting a shadow that looks suspiciously like a little man with one hand tucked into his coat. You're not saying it's a sign, but you're also not saying that. Here's where it gets interesting. Several military museums around the world each claim to have Napoleon's original coat, but none of them can explain the lining, stitched with an unfamiliar weave, dirt-stained in a pattern that resembles a leaf. Historians, of course, dismiss the idea. Fabric doesn't grow trees, they say. And Napoleon was a strategist, not a gardener. But this rooftop and this stubborn little tree might disagree. You crouch down and notice something at its base, a worn tag, barely legible. It reads, "Official Tree of the Fifth Regret." You're not sure what the first four were, but this one feels personal. You stand. The garden fades just slightly around the edges, like it's tired of pretending to be real. A breeze ruffles the leaves and the tree whispers one last time. Even empires grow from tiny seeds, and occasionally very poor stitching. The staircase behind you has vanished. In its place, a narrow hallway lined with mirrors. Only they don't reflect your image. They reflect your questions. And somewhere deep in one of them, another whisper stirs. The hallway is impossibly long, the kind that shouldn't fit inside a normal building. The mirrors on either side stretch from floor to ceiling, but none of them show you, not even a blur, just flickers of other people. Other times, you walk slowly, and with each step, a mirror lights up, not with electricity, but memory. In the fourth mirror on the left, a chandelier swings gently over a room painted in soft gold. Velvet curtains, polished floors, and a scent you can't place. Something between rosewater and old perfume. You stop. The air shifts, and the mirror breathes. It was her favorite night to disappear. Suddenly you're there, inside the grand ballroom of Buckingham Palace, mid-19th century. Everything sparkles, lace, buttons, laughter. But the woman in the simple black mask, that's Queen Victoria, and she's dancing like no one's watching. To be clear, no one's supposed to know about this. There are no diary entries, no portraits, but the wall, and apparently now the mirror, remembers a different kind of queen. One who, once a year, slipped into costume and snuck into a masquerade, hosted not at court, but at a hidden estate just outside London. She didn't come to rule, she came to waltz. A count once claimed he fell in love with her that night. He said she smelled like ink and lemon biscuits and moved like someone with nothing to prove. Of course, he never knew who she was. He died believing she was a myth, but the wall insists it was real. One night, as the story goes, she was nearly discovered. A nosy duke, drunk on port and jealousy, grabbed her hand mid-dance and yanked off her mask. Gasps echoed through the ballroom. The string quartet stopped mid-measure, but instead of panic, she laughed. A low, mischievous laugh that stopped time for exactly 7 seconds. Then she curtsied, vanished through the servants' hallway, and was never seen there again. Some historians say Victoria was too proper, too controlled for such behavior. But others have noted a strange entry in one of her journals. Sometimes I still hear the music when it rains. There's also a letter from a chambermaid claiming the Queen once had a pair of dance shoes hidden behind her desk, worn through at the heels, and one final clue, a scratched message inside a ballroom fireplace, only visible under candlelight. 1 night a year, I was free. You touch the mirror, and the scene fades like steam on glass. The hallway stretches on, but now it smells faintly of wax and lemon biscuits. You laugh softly, not because it's funny, but because there's something ridiculously human about even the most powerful people needing to sneak away and dance. As you keep walking, the next mirror ripples, not glass this time, but something closer to water. Reflections shimmer, bending in a way that suggests you're about to hear from someone who never got to finish their sentence. And, sure enough, the next whisper arrives, this one carrying flour, rebellion, and just a hint of burnt crust. The mirror dissolves, not with a sound, but with a sensation, like stepping through smoke that forgot how to be warm. You stumble slightly, not from fear, but because the ground beneath you shifts. It's wood now, uneven, covered in flour. You're in an attic. Low ceiling, a single beam of dusty light through a cracked skylight. There's a baker's apron hanging from a nail and a radio made of gears that shouldn't exist in the same century. The wall creaks to life behind you. This one speaks in crumbs and conspiracy. Let me tell you, it says, about the French Revolution and the man who almost overthrew it using sourdough. Sure, why not? The baker's name was Lucien Marchand. No textbooks mention him, not by name at least. But the whisper insists Lucien was everywhere, in the alleys of Paris, whispering to women buying baguettes, in the back rooms of printing presses, hiding manifestos in flour sacks. Here's the weird part. He never picked up a gun, never stormed the Bastille, But according to this wall, Lucien was the reason bread riots didn't turn into civil war riots more often. He baked peace into his loaves. Literally. Tiny scrolls tucked inside warm bread like revolutionary fortunes. Slogans, warnings, maps. Some say he even designed a code, one that used sesame seeds to signal safe house, poppy seeds for danger, and no seeds at all for run. One famous night, July 27, 1794, he baked a special batch marked only with an X. Inside each loaf, a tiny drawing of a guillotine with a crown falling off. That night, Robespierre fell. Coincidence? Historians say yes. The wall disagrees. In fact, it tells you Lucien once met with Danton dressed as a nun to deliver an éclair filled with political satire. The pastry was apparently so good, Danton wept and decided not to murder anyone that week. Again, debated, but the wall seems smug about it. Eventually, Lucien vanished. No records, no arrest, no monument. But in a hidden drawer behind this attic wall, there's a single, burned bread paddle carved into the handle. Flour remembers what stone forgets. You turn to leave, brushing flour from your coat you didn't know you had. There's a soft warmth behind your shoulder, like a fire that just went out. And the air smells of something impossibly comforting, dough, smoke, and defiance. Before you descend the attic stairs, the wall whispers one final thought, slow and fond. History has kings and generals, but revolutions? They're made by people who need. You laugh despite yourself. Then the floorboards shift, giving way to a dark passage that smells faintly of salt and ink. And from deep within that corridor, another story begins to stir. One framed not by fire or bread, but by glass, sand, and the world's most inaccurate hourglass. You follow the corridor as it narrows into something more like a ship's hull. Curved wood overhead, soft, creaking underfoot. The air turns briny, thick with the smell of salt and rotting rope. Somewhere in the distance, gulls call, even though you're still indoors. At least you think you are. The whisper rises before the room appears. This one is slower, like a tide pulling back. It sounds older than the others, but also amused, like it's about to tell you a secret it's been dying to spill for centuries. Columbus, it says, wasn't supposed to land there. You step through an arched doorway and into a study, lit only by candlelight. Old maps cover every surface, tables, walls, the back of a sleeping cat. They're hand-drawn, full of wavy coastlines and sea monsters that look suspiciously like inflatable pool toys. At the center of the room, a wooden hourglass tips back and forth on its own. The sand within flows the wrong way, upward, and near it lies a pair of gloves stained with red clay and citrus oil. The whisper continues. On the night before his first voyage, Christopher Columbus misread his own timekeeping device. Completely backwards, thought it was midnight when it was barely sunset. That's how they launched too early. The image appears in your mind. Columbus on the dock, staring at an hourglass like it owes him money. He's convinced time is slipping, and he rallies his crew to depart ahead of schedule. What nobody knows or remembers is that this misreading caused them to miss an entire island. An uncharted place just a few leagues off their intended course. A place, the wall claims, where stone faces hummed lullabies and the trees whispered poetry. We called it La Isla que nunca espera, the whisper says. The island that never waits. Historians don't mention this island, of course. And why would they? You can't prove the existence of a place that doesn't stay put. It's said to disappear and reappear depending on whether the navigator believes in it. There's a story, half legend, half lunchtime rumor, that a cabin boy named Matteo saw the island in a dream 3 nights in a row. He drew a perfect map of it on a piece of hardtack and tried to show the captain. Columbus ate the biscuit before he looked. Later, when they landed, Columbus declared he'd reached India. He hadn't, but the island, the real one, it drifted out of reach, still waiting for someone punctual enough to deserve it. Some scholars argue the whole story is metaphorical, something about lost opportunities in the age of exploration. But the wall disagrees. It remembers the cat's name, it remembers the flavor of the clay, and it remembers the exact pattern of stars above La Isla que nunca espera on the night it was supposed to be found. The whisper softens. History is full of destinations missed because someone checked the clock twice instead of once. You run your hand over a map near the door. Beneath the ink, faint indentations form a phrase. The ocean forgives no late arrivals. As you leave, the hourglass tips one last time, and the sand turns to water. Your footsteps echo as you descend. A short flight of stone steps, the walls now lined with faded signs in 10 languages. Ahead, a rusted gas pump leans against a wall, humming low like a baritone memory. And just beyond it, a new story begins to bubble up. This one soaked in gasoline,
mud, and a map that might have been drawn by accident or divine mischief.
The stairwell empties into what looks like the remnants of a service station, mid-century maybe, but warped by time and silence. Rusted signage dangles from chains above your head, one letter flickering dimly. ERVCE with assembly. The Bixiki pump is ancient, its paint is chipped, its numbers stuck mid-spin, and yet it hums, a low, mechanical lullaby. The air smells of oil and damp canvas. There's a tire swing dangling from nowhere, slowly twisting in place. You don't question it. Not here. Not now. The wall near the back leans slightly, like it's listening for the right moment. And then it speaks, not quickly, but with the drawn-out patience of someone who knows they've got you for a while. During World War II, it says, a tank unit went missing for 3 days because of a gas station that didn't exist, or ute, blink. Apparently, during the Allied push through rural France, a squadron led by a half-deaf colonel named Whitmore was rerouted by a local who swore there was a shortcut. According to the maps, the route was empty farmland, but according to the wall and one very confused pigeon courier, it was not only a road, but one with a fully operational gas station, complete with snacks. Here's the twist. The gas station didn't appear on aerial recon. It wasn't listed on any French registry. And when soldiers returned 3 days later to retrieve supplies they'd stashed in the broom closet, the building was gone. Completely. Whitmore insisted the place was real. He remembered the exact radio station playing over the pump intercom. Je ne regrette rien. He remembered filling out a guest book and eating a sandwich labeled Victory Loaf. But others in his unit disagreed. Some swore it was just a barn. Others claimed they never stopped at all. One soldier, interviewed years later, said, "All I remember is headlights in fog and a woman in a mechanic's jumpsuit offering me a mint." Stranger still, a map was found in Whitmore's belongings decades later. On the back, in careful handwriting, was a drawing of the station, down to the vending machine stocked with chewing gum and ration stamps. At the bottom, never made a left here again. Historians chalk it up to exhaustion, stress, or a fever dream caused by mouldy bread. But there's a rumor in local folklore. If you're truly lost, the station finds you. The pump clicks softly behind you. A single drop of fuel hits the ground and immediately vanishes like it was never there. You take a step back. On the far wall, just below a cracked Coca-Cola sign, are faint markings scratched in with a key or maybe a nail. War bends roads, memory breaks maps. And beneath that, a smaller note. Nice mint, though. You can't help but laugh. The kind of laugh you only let out when you're starting to forget whether any of this is real, or if that even
matters. You move on, past the pump, through a door that opens into moonlight. Ahead of you is a row of silent vendor carts beneath paper lanterns, and the whisper that rises now smells of sugar, cinnamon, and static. A voice clears its throat. Chipper.
Conspiratorial. Ready for something sweet? It asks. And just like that, history gets deliciously weird again. The lanterns overhead sway in a wind you don't feel. They're strung between empty carts that look like they've been waiting for a festival no one ever came to. Some are striped red and white like candy canes. Others are wooden, carved with faded animals, foxes, deer, something that might be a griffin if you squint. You step forward. The cobblestones beneath your feet are sticky, not in a gross way, more like spilled sugar that's been kissed by decades. The whisper arrives wrapped in a paper cone, warm and amused. Once, it says, NASA delayed a satellite launch because someone dropped a donut into the simulation chamber. You pause, apparently, in the late 1960s, right between moon landings and Cold War chess matches. A group of NASA interns were running late to a systems test. One of them, eager and hypoglycemic, brought in a bag of pastries. Somehow, and you'll never hear the same version twice, one jelly-filled donut made its way into a sealed simulation chamber meant to replicate zero-gravity conditions. It floated, and when it hit the wall, it left a perfect spinning spiral of raspberry preserves across a thermal sensor. The test failed. The alarm went off. A very serious man in a very serious tie said the phrase, "We have a jam breach." The whisper chuckles at its own pun. No official records mention this, of course not. But a blurry photo circulates among engineers to this day, an off-center image of a donut mid-spin, labeled only L18 Donut Event. Now here's where it gets curiouser. Years later, when NASA's Voyager probe passed through a magnetic anomaly near Jupiter, one of its sensors glitched for exactly 12 seconds. The data it transmitted back, a perfect spiral, in raspberry red. Historians have no explanation. Technicians deny the pattern was even visible, but the whisper, smug as powdered sugar, insists. Sometimes the universe remembers, even when we pretend we didn't drop the snack. You reach one of the carts. It's labeled Futures and Fritters. Inside, a display of pastry replicas rotates slowly on a dusty carousel. One is shaped like the Saturn V rocket, another like a crescent moon holding a coffee cup. There's a napkin folded beneath the glass. You squint to read the fading ink. Time expands where sweetness lingers. The air around you smells of burnt sugar and ozone. Something overhead pops, like kettle corn or a small, polite thunderclap. You look up. The lanterns have rearranged themselves into a constellation shaped like a whisk. Before you can ask what that means, the carts all gently creak at once and roll backward, opening a path you didn't see before. It leads into a long, tiled hallway filled with soft light and the faint echo of footsteps that aren't yours. And somewhere just ahead, a new voice stirs, lower, slower, the kind of voice that only speaks when the lights dim and the moon is watching. "Let me show you a map," it says, one that refuses to sit still. The tiled hallway curves like it's trying to forget something. Each tile is a different shade, pearl, moss, rust, bone, and none of them quite match. It smells of parchment and rain, and the air feels curious. Not cold, not warm, just aware. You follow the sound of invisible footsteps, soft, steady, thoughtful. They're the kind of footsteps that belong to someone who never rushes because they already know where every path leads. The whisper begins again, this time like it's leaning in close with a glint in its voice. Marco Polo kept a secret map, not on paper, not in ink. It moved constantly, and he could only read it when he was lost. You stop. That sentence shouldn't make sense, and yet here you are, already halfway convinced. You push open a set of faded blue doors and step into a room shaped like a compass. The floor spins gently, not fast enough to knock you off balance, just enough to remind you that orientation is optional here. All around you, the walls are covered in maps, but none of them stay still. Rivers shift. Cities wander, mountains rise and sink like they're breathing. There's even a small boat drawn in the margin of one map, slowly rowing itself across the parchment, despite having no oarsman. And at the center of the room lies the map, the one the whisper promised. It's not made of paper at all, but of woven threads shifting in color and direction as you watch. Legend, or rumor, says Marco Polo once got hopelessly lost in what he thought was northern China. For days his caravan wandered through salt flats and singing dunes. His guides gave up. His camels sat down and refused to move. So Marco took out a blank scrap of cloth, pricked his finger, and drew a single red line across it. That night, in his dreams, the line moved. It twisted, bent, rerouted. And when he woke, he followed the new path. It led him to a village not found on any official record. The people there spoke no known language. They traded in wind chimes, and their streets shifted direction every dawn. He stayed for 2 nights. On the 3rd morning, the village was gone. No one believed him, of course. Historians say his writings became more colorful the older he got. But tucked into a Venetian archive, buried in a ledger of shipping costs, is a tiny swatch of cloth, faded, frayed, and still warm to the touch. On it, one single red thread. That moves ever so slightly. You step closer to the map. Its threads shimmer, showing you a place that doesn't exist, yet feels achingly familiar. A curved coastline shaped like a sleeping face. A forest in the outline of a hand. A city at the center, named only when. You reach out, and the thread shifts beneath your fingers. Not away, but toward you. It accepts your touch. The whisper sighs with something like approval. Not all explorers leave, it says. Some just stand still and wait for the world to come find them. You close your eyes for a moment. When you open them, the maps have stopped moving. They're watching, now, still and silent. You step back through the compass room. The tiles beneath you realign themselves, spelling something you don't notice until you've passed. Direction is a mood, not a rule. The hallway behind you seals up without a sound. Ahead, you hear a crackling fire, the scent of soot and something older, copper maybe. You feel warmth rising. Not cozy warmth, trial warmth, and just as you step toward it, a fireplace begins to speak. Soft at first, then sharper. Ever wonder how a cauldron started a courtroom? It asks. And now history decides to get heated. The hallway contracts into a narrow passage that smells of burnt wood and damp stone. You brush past hanging herbs, dried bundles of sage, lavender, and something darker, spicier, almost metallic. The air here feels heavy, like it's been holding its breath for centuries. At the end, a fire crackles inside a massive stone hearth, its flames flickering low and strange, too slow, too blue, like it's remembering how to burn. The bricks around it are blackened, warped with age, and something
else, something like fear. The fireplace speaks before you can ask.
Its voice is the snap of dry twigs and the whisper of courtroom murmurs. "Let's talk about the Salem witch trials," it says. And the day a stew pot changed the verdict. You take a seat on the ancient rug before the fire, like a child,
listening to a bedtime story that's probably going to end with someone being turned into a goat.
Here's what the wall tells you. During the height of the hysteria in 1692, a woman named Mercy Osgood was accused of witchcraft, not because of potions or hexes, but because of her stew. She made it every Thursday. Onion, potato, bay leaf,
and, scandalously, paprika. Too exotic for Massachusetts at the time, too flavorful, suspiciously flavorful.
When her neighbor fell ill after eating a slice of salted pork, people didn't blame the pig, they blamed the stew. Specifically, the memory of the stew. The neighbor claimed her dreams smelled like rosemary and screaming. Mercy was brought to trial. The judge asked her if she practiced any seasonings not found in the Holy Scriptures. She replied, "I believe in time and grace." The court did not laugh. Here's where it gets bizarre. During her testimony, someone knocked over the stew pot, which had been brought in as evidence. The contents spilled onto the wooden floor and, allegedly, formed a perfect steaming spiral. Some claimed it was the devil's mark, others said it was just stew being stew. But a man in the crowd, a former cartographer turned reluctant juror, stared at the spiral for nearly a full minute, then stood and said, "That's the exact shape of the windmill pattern found in Flemish folklore. She's not a witch, she's a cook." Gasps, murmurs. The judge paused. Mercy was acquitted, not because anyone truly believed she was innocent, but because no one wanted to admit they didn't understand paprika. Historians debate whether Mercy ever existed. Some say she's a composite of several women, others insist the phrase "time and grace" was a coded resistance slogan. But here's what the wall knows. There was a stew, and someone still makes it. Every Thursday. The fireplace flickers, casting shadows that twist into shapes. Women stirring, judges frowning, bay leaves dancing in mid-air. You look closer and notice something carved into the brickwork, almost too faint to see. She boiled water, not blood. The fire burns low now, almost out. The room cools. Somewhere behind you, a window opens that was never there before. It overlooks a quiet street. The scent of stew fades, replaced by something else. Paper. Ink. The metallic tang of old typewriters. The next whisper comes not from a wall, but from a mailbox, and it's already laughing. "Let me tell you," it says, "about the newspaper that disappeared before it was printed." You step out of the fire-warmed room and into the cool hush of a narrow lane lit by faded gas lamps. It's quiet here, eerily so. No wind, no footsteps. Just the soft, rhythmic tick, tick, tick of a newspaper press that hasn't run in decades. At the end of the lane sits a crooked mailbox, rusted at the edges, its paint peeling in elegant flakes. It hums gently as you approach. Not mechanically. More like it's amused. Before the ink dried, it whispers. The entire front page
vanished. You lean closer.
The flap creaks open on its own, revealing not letters but tiny folded newspapers, no bigger than matchboxes, each one marked with the same headline, "We know what you didn't write." The mailbox begins its story with a sigh and the faint scent of tobacco and cold coffee. In 1913, in a town whose name was removed from every map, a journalist named Bernard Quinn prepared the scoop of the century. Allegedly, he had uncovered evidence of a forged treaty, a missing heir, and a gambling scandal involving 3 monarchs and a haunted billiard table. He worked alone in the attic above the local paper's print room. The Daily Echo, a name that now sounds more like foreshadowing than fact. The night before publishing, Bernard typed the entire article, triple-checked it, and submitted it for the morning run. At 4 a.m. the presses rolled. By 4:15, every copy was missing its front page. Not torn out, not smudged, not blank, just missing. As if it had never been written at all. Here's the strange part. The back of every paper had a single sentence printed upside down in a font the press never carried. Not everything that's true belongs to the morning. Bernard lost his job. Understandably. But he refused to leave the town. He set up a tiny newspaper from his basement, printing 1 copy a week. No subscribers. No deliveries. Just a single copy which he left in the mailbox each Thursday. Every Friday morning it was gone. No one ever saw who took them. No one ever saw Bernard write them. But every week, like clockwork, the paper vanished. And inside that mailbox a faint scent remained. Newspaper ink, citrus peel and, oddly, maple syrup. Some said Bernard had lost his mind. Others whispered that he had stumbled into a story, too big to tell. A truth that would only agree to be read 1 page at a time by 1 person, and only if they didn't speak about it afterward. Decades later, the press itself was dismantled, but the mailbox? Still here, still humming. And if you listen closely, you can hear the keys of an invisible typewriter clacking out phrases like, "History edits itself when no one's looking." This version is better for the archive. Try again, leave fewer clues. You pull back, the flap closes. There's now a tiny note taped to the side, one you're certain wasn't there before. It reads, "Deliver what they forget." You glance down the alley. A stack of newspapers now sits in the corner. The top one has no headlines, only an image. Your shadow, standing exactly where you are now. You decide not to pick it up. Instead, you follow the flicker of neon deeper into the town. A flickering sign reads, "Berlin Jazz 2 flights up." The air vibrates with the low thrum of a saxophone and the memory of dancing footsteps. And the next whisper begins with a chuckle and a minor chord. Let's talk about the night music made the wall disappear. Just for a moment. The staircase groans under your weight, not from age, but from memory. Every step seems to echo a different tune, a bass line here, a trumpet flourish there, like the building itself is rehearsing something. At the top, a heavy velvet curtain, parts without touch. You step into a dimly lit club, hazy with phantom smoke and bathed in the honeyed light of a single, slow-turning disco ball. Tables are scattered like secrets, and on a small stage, a ghostly saxophone leans against a mic stand, waiting. The whisper slides in like a cymbal, brushed gently with wire. Berlin, 1962, the wall had just gone up. Cold air, cold politics. But one night, jazz made it vanish for exactly 7 minutes. You don't move, you just listen. The story begins in a hidden bar, wedged into the east side, technically illegal, officially invisible. A place where artists, outcasts, and spies drank from the same chipped glasses and argued in whispers. Among them was a saxophonist named Emil Roth. Emil wasn't famous, not even in his own neighborhood, but his music was something else. He played like he was remembering a future no one else had lived yet, and he never played the same song twice. One night, a stranger walked in, a West German pianist named Greta, who claimed she'd followed his sound through a broken radio broadcast. They played together for hours, improvised, no sheet music, just instinct and adrenaline and maybe, just maybe, a little magic. At exactly 2:17 a.m., as they slipped into a final duet, one part lullaby, one part rebellion, the wall outside shimmered. Not metaphorically, eyewitnesses later claimed they could see through it. Not all the way, but enough. Faces blurred, arms outstretched. Laughter from the other side. A soldier dropped his cigarette and cried. A dog barked twice and ran through a checkpoint no one remembered unlocking for 7 minutes east and west. Berlin breathed the same rhythm, and then it ended. The club vanished the next morning. Gone, every brick, every bottle, even the curtains. Just a chalk outline where the stage had been and a single scrawled note on the sidewalk. Good jazz knows no borders. Historians don't believe the tale. They cite mass hysteria, Cold War paranoia, a probable gas leak, but some people still hum that melody, especially near the river just before sunrise. The whisper fades, replaced by the soft click of a record player switching sides. You look around. The club is now empty. Even the saxophone is gone. But someone or something has left a coaster on the table beside you. It reads, "Improvised peace is still peace." You pocket it. No idea why, just feels right. A thin door opens on the far side of the room, leading into a study filled with candlelight and ink-stained desks. And waiting there, as if it's been scribbling notes this whole time, is a desk with a single open notebook and the name Galileo scratched across the cover in very, very dramatic handwriting. The next whisper sounds thoughtful, tired, maybe even a little annoyed. "Let me tell you," it says, "about the man who argued with time and lost to a sundial." The door clicks shut behind you with the gentle finality of a chapter ending itself. The room ahead is bathed in the flickering glow of a dozen candles, each sitting atop precariously stacked books, as if flames and facts had made an uneasy truce. At the center of it all, a heavy wooden desk, warped from centuries of ink spills and unfinished thoughts. Laid open atop the surface is a battered notebook. Its pages flutter slightly, though there's no breeze. The name Galileo is carved across the front with theatrical flair, like whoever wrote it wanted history to know he wasn't whispering. The whisper, this time, is drier, older, a little grumbly, like it has chalk dust in its throat. Galileo Galilei once spent 3 years arguing with a sundial, it begins.
And no, he didn't win. You raise an eyebrow. Fair. It started, the whisper explains, with time, not the philosophical kind, the petty, everyday kind. Galileo hated being late, hated more when people were late to him. So, in true Renaissance
fashion, he tried to invent a better way to track the hours, one that didn't rely on clouds, shadows, or uncooperative furniture. He built a device, half clock, half compass, with a small brass rooster on top. It was meant to correct sundials using planetary movement, moonlight reflection, and what he called stubborn mathematics. The sundial on his windowsill, however, refused to agree. Every afternoon it showed a slightly different hour than Galileo's device, and so he began writing notes to it, actual notes, letters, sarcastic ones. He pinned them to the windowsill. Once again, you've betrayed my trust. If you're attempting comedy, please cease. The moon and I will be continuing without you. One entry in his journal reads simply, "The sun is a liar and the dial is its accomplice." Over time, the sundial seemed to respond. Its shadow grew more erratic, drifting oddly even on clear days. Galileo accused the wood of warping out of spite. He built a new dial. It behaved worse. His assistant, Maria Celeste, tried to intervene. She reportedly asked, "Have you considered the sundial might be correct?" Galileo did not take this well. To this day, there is no clear explanation. But visitors to Galileo's home in Arcetri have claimed the sundial still shifts unexpectedly, always when someone looks at it too long. And the brass rooster? Historians say it went missing. Others say it was seen years later atop a clock tower in Venice, silently nodding at noon and midnight only. As you lean over the desk, you notice the notebook's open page is blank, until a phrase slowly appears, as though being written by invisible ink. Precision is just stubbornness in a lab coat. You smirk somewhere. Galileo probably would have agreed, and then built a machine to prove why your smirk was 5 seconds early. The candles begin to dim, one by one, in perfect time. The last to go out is balanced on a stack of philosophy books with a melted wax trail shaped suspiciously like a shrug. A hatch opens on the side wall, square, wooden, oddly modern. Inside is darkness that smells like paint, leather, and vanilla, and a new whisper beckons.
Louder this time, bouncier. Careful now, it says. The next door never opens, but it does talk. And just like that, the story invites you to knock on a door that doesn't believe in hinges.
The hatch leads you into a short corridor lined with wallpaper that seems to pulse gently, like it's breathing. It's patterned in damask vines and tiny eyes, just enough to make you wonder if they blink when you're not watching. At the far end stands a door. Not grand, not threatening, just a door, smooth wood, brass handle, no keyhole, no seams, but something feels off. The air is too still, the light too focused, and the whisper? It's already waiting, curling around the frame like incense. This
door, it says, has never opened, not once, but it knows everything behind it. You step closer. The door doesn't move, it doesn't creak or glow.
Instead, a soft vibration passes through the floor, like the thrum of distant footsteps or applause happening too far away to join. And then the door begins to talk. Not in sentences at first, just phrases, flashes. Leonardo once hid blueprints
in a dessert. He built a working ice cream cannon. It fired vanilla at 3 meters per second.
The Pope was not amused. You blink. The door, apparently, is in a mood. The whisper chuckles like a librarian who's about to spill royal secrets. So here's the tale. During a particularly intense creative sprint in the early 1500s, Leonardo da Vinci grew bored of painting, sculpting, inventing, and reinventing the concept of reinventing. He turned to desserts, specifically cold ones. He theorized that freezing sweetness could calm the humors and promote mental levity. So he designed a contraption, half siege engine, half gelato cart, that churned, compressed, and launched flavored snow at high speed. He called it La Dolce Macchina. Aiming it proved problematic. He nearly decapitated a court jester with a scoop of lemon sorbet. One duke chipped a tooth on frozen custard, but Leonardo didn't stop. He embedded schematics in pastries. He doodled gear ratios inside tarts. He once carved an entire prototype in butter. The Pope, hearing rumors of culinary blasphemy, summoned Leonardo to explain himself. Leonardo responded by delivering a chilled dessert that, when sliced, revealed a miniature drawing of St. Peter's Basilica inside a raspberry swirl. The Pope fainted, probably from delight, possibly from lactose intolerance. Historians ignore this episode, of course, too whimsical, no documentation. But in the vaults of a forgotten convent in Bologna, there exists a cookbook that cannot be opened with hands, only with song and its title. The Blueprints of Flavor. You place your hand gently on the surface of the door. It's warm. Beneath your palm, letters begin to rise, like Braille for the overly curious. They spell. Some doors don't open because the story behind them is already too much, and beneath that, in smaller script, desserts are just daydreams made edible. You laugh, you're not sure if it's the story or the whisper, or maybe it's just the idea of Da Vinci loading a cannon with pistachio swirl. The door quiets. Satisfied. A panel to the right slides open, revealing a narrow passage filled with velvet darkness and the smell of old stone, and waiting there where the light doesn't quite reach is a final wall. This one cracked, ancient, and humming like it swallowed the echoes of every whisper that came before. The voice returns, now softer, slower, like it's tucking you in. One more story, it says. One last place, where all the voices meet. And just like that, you step forward, toward the last whisper at the end of the alley. The velvet darkness wraps around you like a worn blanket still carrying the scent of an old story. No lanterns here, no flickering signs or trick mirrors, just the gentle sound of dust shifting and a heartbeat that might be yours. The corridor ends at a dead-end wall, plain stone, cracked, quiet, covered in fingerprints that shimmer briefly when you look away. This is it, the end of the path, the place where whispers come to rest. The voice returns, not loud, not eager, but inevitable. Every
tale leaves an echo, it murmurs.
And this is where they collect. You sit. There's nowhere else to go. The stone feels warm beneath you, not with heat, but memory. Like sitting on the lap of a grandfather who tells bedtime stories in riddles and then pretends to fall
asleep before the punchline. The wall hums, then speaks, not with just one voice this time, but many,
woven together like threads in a tapestry. And the story it tells is strange, even by now. In this alley, long ago, or possibly not yet, a child walked in alone. They weren't special, weren't chosen, just curious. That's all it ever takes. They touched the wall, not with reverence, but with boredom. They expected bricks, silence, maybe a bug. Instead, the walls sighed and whispered the entire history of the world into their ear, backwards. They emerged 3 days later, blinking, carrying a single phrase scribbled on a gum wrapper. Whispers are just facts wearing pajamas. That phrase ended up in a university lecture, which inspired a thesis, which was adapted into a play, which became a musical, which flopped spectacularly on opening night. But one audience member remembered the gum wrapper, and years later, they built a house with walls that whispered. You're sitting against one of those walls now. You lean back, close your eyes. The voices begin to slow. They murmur names you've never heard, places that haven't been built, dates from calendars that don't exist yet. Each whisper is a ripple, smoothing out the noise of everything else. One says, "Some truths only bloom in silence." Another, "Don't trust clocks, trust shadows," and one more, quieter still. You were never lost, you were listening. You exhale. The wall exhales with you. The air softens. The darkness lightens, not with light, but with stillness. And just before sleep begins to pull the world out from under you, the last whisper comes, barely audible, sweet as breath on glass. All stories end here, eventually, but yours doesn't.
Have to... Not yet. You smile. Eyes closed now. A little piece of stardust in the quiet corner of someone else's dream. And the wall says nothing more. Doesn't need to, not tonight.